My name is David Safabian. I am blessed to be on stage with these two. I am the general counsel for a group that you probably are not expecting to be here. I'm the general counsel for the American Conservative Union. Yep. I get that all the time, so keep it on. We work on criminal justice reform across the country. The Crazy House down the street. We work in state capitals all over the country. I'm blessed to work with Topeka. We work on dignity for incarcerated women. And I have the good fortune to be able to work with Reform Alliance, one of the groups that I think is the most impactful criminal justice reform organization in the country. And when they asked me to come and talk, I absolutely jumped on this because there is nothing more important than people's liberty and freedom and the fairness of the system. And that's what we work on hand in glove with Reform, with Topeka, with Tony, and with a few folks in this room. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Okay, looks like I'm gonna have to get the audience involved because that's the only way we're gonna get a little energy in here. So my question to all of you is, how many people in this room would say that they are impacted by incarceration? Okay, thank you. And so hopefully by the time we're done, everyone will have raised their hand, right? There are millions, I think upwards of 70 million people who have criminal convictions in this country, over 100 million people with arrest records. There's millions of children who are impacted by parental incarceration. And while we talked about working on different types of legislation and moving this work, while we have great allies who move alongside of us, it has been those of us who have been directly affected by the system and using our voices in order to share our lived experience and also create the solutions that matter. And so I want to also acknowledge all of you who are here who just acknowledged your impact by the system, because while there is so much stigma that still disrupts our communities, although we know that 1 in 3 people have experienced this disease, it is important that we are standing in front of our truth so that more people will not be shamed. And in this month of second chances, that we're understanding that everybody deserves that. So I thank you all for being here, for acknowledging that we are one community and that it's going to take all of us in order to make these changes. And so to start, again, you know, we will hear from Meek. I'm hopeful of that. But in his 5 years of freedom, it is super important that we're elevating these issues. And, you know, while Second Chance Month has been declared by the president as April, for us, second, third, fourth, fifth chances are chances that we deserve each and every day when we have paid our debt to society. And so, Tony, I'm going to start with you. Can you talk about a little bit about your journey being a child of an incarcerated parent, what that had been like from you as a very young age, and why you never stopped fighting for 34 years?
Yeah. So my father went to prison when I was 9 years old. And we come from a community, come from a family, a block, a community, a city where incarceration was incredibly normalized then and now. And so going across the country, well, first my dad was in DC jail. Then they got removed from there and went to Quantico Marine Base, right? Yeah, I said that, Quantico Marine Base, where you had to visit at the cells, no visiting hall. Then when they got convicted, they got life without parole, had to journey 3,000 miles away to Lompoc, California for the next 12, 13 years. And then he came back on the East Coast to FCI Cumberland for the next 23. And the challenges that presented for me growing up in the time of DC being the murder capital and the crack capital of the United States. But being disconnected from my dad, somebody who was present, somebody who cared, somebody who advocated for education and all the things that people don't normally attach to somebody that's, you know, in the lifestyle that he was in. But we held on to that, and he helped me navigate the toughest terrain so that I wouldn't end up in a cell like he did. But I am incredibly happy and elated, because then we've been on panels before and we would talk about the fight and free Tony Lewis. We ain't got to say that no more. It's Tony Lewis free.
Yes, and he is here with us today.
And that the journey to my father being released really was more about a lot of other people and my service to the community here in DC, but also more broadly calling attention to how this process of incarceration goes far beyond just the person incarcerated. That I did that time with him and his children all across this country that's in the same situation that I was in. And then I brought children into this world with my wife, Jessica. So his grandchildren, my daughters, had to be impacted. So in families like ours, it's a multi-generational trauma, right? So when we talk about when that debt is paid, I think it's so vital and important that people be able to have all of their rights restored. They've paid their debt, like that should be over. And I know it takes incremental change. We know that, right? That's how things work, but we have to be more bold, because while we're waiting for a lot of these changes, our families are falling apart. I'm so grateful that we've been able to stay connected. It's 34 years erodes most bonds, right? Right.
Even when people are free.
Even when people are free. Mm-hmm. So for us to still be bonded the way we are, yes. I know, because I do this for a living, so I know that we're blessed in that regard. Mm-hmm. But we can't look at us as we're not the norm.
Yes.
Families are being completely destroyed by incarceration.
Let me just flag something that Tony said and run with it for a second. The hardest thing I ever had to do was 2 weeks before my report date, sit down with my 7-year-old daughter and explain that Daddy's going away. And she is still not recovered from that. I see somebody over there with a great sweatshirt on that says it's easier to build strong children than it is to fix broken men. And that's 100% true. When we put people through the grinder unnecessarily, we are making weaker children. We are harming kids. And we're creating these intergenerational cycles of poverty, of emotional trauma. And then we ask ourselves, why are our cities hollowed out? Why are our communities hollowed out? And so, when folks, particularly folks on my side of the aisle, say, well, we've got to deal with victims, we've got to let victims have their justice, I don't hear them talking about that. And they're talking about children of incarcerated people, spouses of incarcerated people. And that's something that every member of Congress, every staffer, every voter needs to remember, is that every time somebody goes away to prison, there is a broken family that is left behind who didn't do anything wrong. And that was one of the reasons why I got involved in this work, was so that other people wouldn't have to have the same conversations with their sons and daughters.
Thank you both for that. Yeah. I think it's so important, to underscore children. Every time I go into a visit and I see someone, or, I have my youngest brother's incarcerated, and having the conversation, we're trying to get my nieces and nephew's mother to allow them to go to see him, and how important that was for them, because they love their dad and they didn't need to be harmed by that. And just, I've watched you post pictures with your dad and your kids and your wife, and how, we don't think about it. The judges don't think about it. The prosecutors don't think about it when they end up incarcerating the person that you are incarcerating an entire community. And, while we do this work, because we understand that it's important, each of us that use our voice each and every day to relive and live in our trauma, because nobody wants to have to continue to tell the story of your worst in order to get people to understand the right thing to do, when we know it's the right, the dignity of people. We know the humanity of people. We know what people are supposed to do. But some of us have been called to live in that pain. And so I think that, while we do this to try to prevent, your daughters or, our community members, my nieces and nephews, not to have to go in themselves, we also implore people who are watching to understand that it is not okay to continue to crucify someone who has already redeemed themselves, whether it was through the court, whether it was through the community, whether it's through their own rehabilitation and redemption, which, by the way, they do not get, we don't get while we're incarcerated. That when we come home, we should have an opportunity to rebuild our lives in any way we dare to dream, and not the way that someone just wants to put a kind of stamp or one size fits all around it. And so what I'll add, or I guess my question leading to that for you, David, is can you share a little bit about like your journey, even how you've been able to go from incarceration to being head of the American Conservatives Union to, lead this effort and going across the aisle, because it is important. It took both Democrats and Republicans to get us to this place. And it will take both Democrats and Republicans to remove us from this place.
Yeah, it's been a hell of a trip, I'll tell you. Let me start with, I used to work down in the 7th District for the Metropolitan Police Department. I worked on the Hill for a member of the Judiciary Committee right after 9/11. We gave the Justice Department every single power that they asked for. It's said that a pro-prosecution Democrat is somebody who's been mugged, and a pro-reform Republican is someone who's been jailed. And it sounds kind of trite and pithy, but it's absolutely true. We all, come from, or we all have our own stories, and by and large, folks on my side of the aisle don't understand, haven't experienced what it's like to see your liberty taken away or your relative's liberty taken away, certainly to the same extent as folks on the left. So I got caught up in a scandal. I fought and fought and fought, and finally I ended up reporting. Spent 22 days in a shoe because they didn't have a bed for me, and did a year and a day, which isn't much compared to what your dad did. It's nothing. But in that year that I was away from my family, one, it was harder on my wife and children than anybody else. Two, just seeing the amount of wasted human spirit and capital was mind-boggling to somebody who kind of came out of the policy world, right? I couldn't believe that this is what they were doing with human beings, that it was a warehouse. When I was going through, you were supposed to take classes to make yourself better. I had a law degree. I was pretty well educated. The BOP's idea of classes was putting on a National Geographic video and calling that oceanography. Yeah. Right? Or putting on a History Channel thing and calling it a history degree. But what really crystallized it for me was there was this guy in the camp. He'd done 11 years, named Billy. I won't use his last name. And Billy was a camp plumber. He could fix anything that water or crap flowed through, to be quite honest. And I asked Billy, because he and I were both getting ready to get out, what are you going to do? And Billy said, I want to go be a plumber, because you make a hell of a lot more money being a plumber than you do selling meth in Maine. Except that he didn't have any money, didn't have any credit. There was no way that the union was going to give him a union card. And I'm pretty certain that Billy's back in, because if you send somebody out the gate without a meaningful job and a safe place to live and the ability to go and get education, for some reason we're all surprised when they go back in. So when I got out, I didn't want to, I was exactly like what you were talking about, Topeka. I wanted nothing to do with this. I didn't want to relive it. I wanted to put it behind me and just be anonymous and go back to what I was doing. And a cranky old Irishman calls me, and he kept on badgering, saying, you got to take this job up. And that's when I got into criminal justice reform 8 years ago. And so far, people, when I was going through my trials and my appeals, I spent a lot of time on my knees in the church asking why. And never heard back the answer, but now looking backward, I see that there was a path clear as day. And the result was we were able to push the First Step Act, which has had a few things happen. We've been able to pass good bills in places like Mississippi. And just on Friday, we stopped a bill in Tennessee, and it wasn't just us, it was a whole group of primarily conservatives. Stopped a bill in Tennessee that would have created a 3 strikes law that would have tripled incarceration in Tennessee. So there's a reason for why we all have to go what we went through. It ain't fun, but it is so important that people understand the story.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. And I was just thinking, and I wanted to kind of underscore something that I heard you say a minute ago about, you only doing a year and a day. And that you felt, that was nothing in comparison to 34 years. Santa Rucker, who's here, who did 20 years, and, I did 3. But I think what we cannot do is discredit or diminish our own experiences. And so often what we realize, I've even experienced that people say, because I wasn't raised in extreme poverty, and because I was raised very privileged, that I don't have a right to do this work, because I should be living, I should have lived in a particular way or been through certain things to be able to be a credible messenger, which is not true. A day in a prison cell, a day in a cage is a day in a cage. And whether or not, it's unfortunate, we know that these examples of over-incarceration where people are serving double, triple life in prison for any crime, violent or non-violent, because in many countries, people who actually have crimes that are considered violent crimes do not do even more than 5 years. So I think, when we talk about that, I think it's so important for us not to diminish our own experience. So I just wanted to say that, because either way, a day is a day. So yeah, that just really hit me. But Tony, for you, we heard you talk about family, all the work that you're doing in the community, and just thinking about second chances, right? What would you say, we're here, obviously we have to share our experiences. Most of the people in the room know what they are, but for those who don't, who might be watching, we're sharing that. What would you say about advocacy, legislation, or even just about people, how they need to show up for those of us who are coming home? Your dad is incredibly fortunate to have you, like you said, right? A family, a solid family network and nucleus that he can come home to. But there are still things that even you will not be able to support him with, having him being away, right, for 34 years. So what would you lend to anyone listening on how they can support people who have lived this particular experience?
Yeah, well, and pardon me, the tank fight got me hoarse, so I'm sorry about that. But I think that I love the way you frame that question, because I think it is really about what everybody has, like a nickel in this quarter, if you will. So even for family members that are receiving people returning, right? You have to extend grace and understanding and patience. You have to understand that the person that's returning to you is not the person that left. And there's things about that person that you may not know, and things about you that that person may not know. So hopefully your love can help you guys work through that, but lean on others to be the resources, to provide the things that you can't, right? To the business community and to society in general, to neighbors, fellow residents. You have to stop seeing people as just a bad decision that they made. I don't even want us to say returning citizen anymore. I think we really have to be intentional in saying citizen, and that whatever that person feels like, yes, that they should receive, that somebody returning from incarceration should receive those same things. A right to work where they want to work, to live where they want to live, to vote. And here in DC, I do want to raise up how proud I am that on one level, you never lose your right to vote in terms of as somebody that's been incarcerated. And in 2020, we was able to push through policy that allow even our incarcerated residents to vote. So like the 2020 election, my father voted from FCI Cumberland. And I want to, that should be the example for around the country that your rights as a person is never stripped away from you. But back to the business community and people that are providing licensure and certifications and all of the nine. Once somebody completes their sentence, right? People should be able to be right back at square one. That is a public safety issue when people cannot. Just like the guy you said, you just described, the plumber in Maine who may have found himself back in. I live in a place where 92% of the people that go to prison in this city, that used to be Chocolate City, right? So when we were Chocolate City, that made sense. But now we're about 48, 49% of the population. We still represent probably 92% of the people that go to prison. But I want to break that down a little more. It's 92% African-American, but mainly it's African-Americans from Washington. We also represent that same thing when you talk about unemployment, when you talk about people that are ODing, when you talk about homelessness, food insecurity, all of the nine. Our families are in a state of emergency, and it's directly related to how normalized incarceration has been and how limiting incarceration has been. 75% of our job market is adverse to returning citizens, and our city government probably does the best job at hiring formerly incarcerated citizens, right? But the business community here really has to step up. And it's no longer can we just keep saying, okay, well, they didn't hire you, be resilient, right? Because anywhere that opens up those doors, it's gonna be a natural bottleneck. And then you have programs that we have established here in DC, like Project Empowerment, which was the vision of Mr. Charles Jones. And then you have like the One's Pathways program. These programs have life-changing programs, right? But they are marginalized because people can't easily matriculate into the job market. But then people from all over the world flock here for that very same job market. Do you imagine being here and everybody's coming here to chase their dream, but you're from here and it's like it's a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
So that's how this thing sort of is impacting. So we see the spikes on, with the carjacking or the robberies or the gun violence, right? It's relationship to what I just described.
Absolutely.
Right? So we have to foster a climate and a culture of redemption, not only here in the District of Columbia, but all across this country. And that's sort of the takeaway that I want people to have from this, that when you can do something, do it. HR managers, people at the church, people at the mosque, whomever, get in the game because we need you.
That's right. Okay.
95% of the people in prison are going to come home. Do you want them to come home as good neighbors, or do you want them to come home continuing their troubles? That's the difference between using a prison as a warehouse and using a prison as a gateway to redemption. But I'm going to say one thing that's kind of controversial here, and that is that we all say, we want a fresh start, we want a clean slate, right? We should be given all of our rights back. But listen carefully when people say that, because I think fair to say folks on the right are skeptical of giving voting rights back, but it goes both ways. When was the last time you heard a Democrat say they should get their Second Amendment rights back? I'm sorry, but you don't get to pick and choose which rights you get back.
Hey, with Dave, can I say something to that? Let me say something to that. Well, I think is so pointed about that. Oh, I gotta hurry up.
Yeah, you gotta hurry up.
Listen.
I want the conversation to go, but I think we could come back.
Why we gotta stop there?
Because we have somebody waiting on to come in.
All right. You gotta go back.
All right. I mean, yeah, Meek. When Meek come on, we got the all right. All right. All right. So we're told to wrap up, but are you all ready? So do you want us to? Because, well, I think he can go ahead with his point.
It's time to wrap up.
Oh no, that Meek is back now. Okay.
Yeah, can y'all hear me now?
All right. Well, I don't like dead silence. So while we're waiting for Britton to come,
I can't hear you guys anymore if y'all can hear me. Is it like I'm texting on the chat right here? I know I hear it's dead silence, but I ain't hear nobody ask me any question yet. The chat erased. Whatever question you had in the chat, it erased. Oh, so what made me want to get involved with reform? If you guys can hear me, what made me want to get involved? I caught a case when I was 18, 19 years old, and I was going in and out of prison due to probation my whole life. And my whole life, I've been going in and out of prison. I always kind of, I was brain tangled about how could I keep going back to prison. And at the time of when I was going in and out of prison, I was actually doing well for myself. From the age of 23 to the age of 32, when I actually got off of probation due to giving my case back, I was sent to jail 3 to 4 times, placed on house arrest once or twice. And, I always try to come up with a solution of if a guy went to prison for a technical violation for smoking marijuana or, showing up to see his probation officer late, how do you recover from going to jail for 3 to 4 months? And not losing your job, not losing your house, paying rent, not losing your children. And when I thought about it from every single direction, I never could come up with any solid base solution that they said America offered to you. And to the guy that was sitting in the middle, he seems very passionate about getting his point across. What you said about the dreams and nightmare, I was listening to you guys the whole time. It was very true about seeing other people being able to chase their dreams and you being labeled a felon. And life is basically a nightmare where you can't get in school, you can't get a job, or you can't get the same opportunities as people that come outside of America. So I felt that what you were saying. And I happen to be one of the lucky ones that slipped through the cracks, but I don't deem myself as special. Going through that situation and having that type of support system. I come up from them support systems y'all talking about. My mom come from foster care, and my father was killed at the age of 5. And before that, he grew up in the prison system. So basically, if my mom was actually doing well and working 8 hours a day, I was basically just grown and placed in the streets where the streets I had to learn the ins and outs of my environment, and everything in my environment basically came with failure. And I dodged that. So seeing the people stand up for me even while being famous and making a way from that type of environment made me want to stand up for my people in a very special way and come up with something like reform, because I felt the pain and went through everything that we're representing and some of the things that y'all talking about on the stage right now. You could text me the next question too. Question 2. The second question was about talking about safety. Safety, I think is very important. I did a Christmas drive, and I just was talking to Robert Kraft about this on a flight. I did a Christmas drive in Philadelphia where we gave away a lot of toys, a lot of bikes. We wanted to give away technology, computers, and things that young kids and my environment wasn't accessible to, even on Christmas. Not just giving things away and taking money and buying gifts, but giving kids the value point of that you have somebody that you can turn to that do care about you. What he spoke about also, he said earlier about having a male figure in the house and someone that actually loves you when you actually live in a terrible environment. uh Giving out all those toys, we had big boxes and a lot of clothes and things like that. What I noticed at that toy drive, if you go back and check the footage, because it's probably online, it wasn't really too many men there. I watch a lot of women and I watch a lot of little girls and little boys have to carry big boxes of computers and bikes back home. My whole community was really basically locked up or dead in the graveyard. And that was my first time to being able to analyze that and observe that from my side. But I grew up in that same environment right there, and I noticed it wasn't really no strong men helping them women and children carry the gifts back. So I would say safety, on the safety hand, having young people grow up in a bad environment without a supervision could be the most dangerous thing. I don't care how many times you send people to jail. Like me, I come from Philadelphia, from the street side of the environment. I do have a lot of friends and family that come from that environment. And I watch a lot of people. Some of them come home from prison with their head on straight and they want opportunity, and they still end up to go back to prison, and not going back to prison for hurting anybody, not for raping anybody, not for, things terrorism. It's things of not being able to get on their feet, being able trying to use drugs or trying to sell drugs to get on their feet to obtain a property or obtain a foundation to be able to have their family go forward so they don't get caught in the trap that we once got caught in. Like me, myself, when I was 18, I caught this case. I always had my own mind. I was the leader in my division, in my era. I made a decision not to sell dope, which is like heroin. I made a decision not to sell crack cocaine. But in my area and around me, it was a lot of guys that was selling those things that I talked about. I didn't want to sell those. I was selling marijuana. And when I was selling marijuana, I still got found guilty for selling crack cocaine. I got found guilty for pointing a gun at two officers at one time, which I did not do. I did not sell crack cocaine either. I did have marijuana in my pocket. But when I went to prison, I had so many charges when I went to prison. When I got out of prison, I had to sell marijuana again to obtain a lawyer to actually fight the case that they was charging me with. I was fighting at least 28 to 30 charges. I'm 18, 19 years old. Uh, a public defender, from what I was hearing from the streets and what I was seeing, you would basically get crucified in a courtroom. When I got to the courtrooms, I didn't understand anything. And at the age of 19, after paying my lawyer, I didn't know how to pay a lawyer, even house a lawyer, someone to actually direct them to actually fight my case the right way. So, I just was entangled in a system. Not to take you guys too far on that ride, just to say with safety, you don't want anybody living next door to you or having unsupervised children grow up in environments to, become wild, because that's what I was. I grew up in an environment where my dad was there, my mom was at work 8 hours a day. I actually was smart, but it was a very wild environment, and I had to make some decisions that could have caused me my life on a daily basis. So, I just want to say, helping fathers that belong in the house with their children and fathers that can actually be outside in the society and not cause any trouble or hurt anyone and can work on themselves. I think that's a big deal, having fathers in their community and their households. So I can't hear you guys. I just answered the two questions that they text me right here in the chat. Oh, it's another question that they asked. How does incarceration and probation affect economics in the family? And what is reform doing to help? What do they mean by that? How does incarceration and probation affect economics in the family? I would say probation, I would say it affects all aspects of the family, because on probation, you can lose your freedom by just me. I could give you an example. In Philadelphia, the Ben Franklin Bridge is 3 minutes away. It's a 3 minute ride from New Jersey. I moved my son to New Jersey for a better environment from the area we lived in Philadelphia, because it was a drug riddled area, a lot of violence in the area. But on probation, my probation officer leaves the office at 5 o'clock. My son used to say to after school past 5 o'clock. So it would be some days I made it back in town. And, I would be on the road for a week. I'm a music guy that travels the world. And that day I made it back, that would be the one day I got a chance to pick my son up from school. I would have to call my probation officer to get in touch with her to get my son. She leave at 5 o'clock, so she told me I could not leave a message. So I had to make a decision in my mind that I wanted to go get my son and drop my son off to uh, New Jersey, where I had to cross a state line, which was technically a violation. But I did that every day to have that bond with my son. Even meeting Michael Rubin, who was one of the keyest persons on helping me put this thing right here called Reform together. Just to build a relationship with him. I met him in Pennsylvania. I'm a young guy from the hood. This was a Caucasian billionaire. I never knew anybody from my environment that succeeded to that level, and he was a well-grounded man with morals. When I met Michael Rubin, he used to ask me to fly to Vegas with him and go hang out and do things. You know, I used to do those things to take those opportunities because there was opportunities of a lifetime that I never engaged with coming from my environment of failure. And, you know, I took those opportunities and, you know, I was really breaking probation when I was flying with him out because I wasn't asking my probation officer, which led to me asking Michael Rubin to come to court with me and see the way that it operates in the courtroom. He cried in that courtroom when I went to prison. I cried when I had to go to prison that day. And when he came to see me one day, we talked about everything and we wrote it down on a brochure, not even a piece of paper, about how we could come up with reform. And, you know, we here today. So, you know, I think that affects, you know, I went off topic a little bit, but, you know, it affects families and communities in so many ways. You guys on the stage spoke on that before I got on this call right here. I was listening myself. Oh, so how does jail, so y'all good? All right, thank you guys. I appreciate it. So I couldn't hear y'all guys. Sorry for the delays and me sounding off, but I was tuned in the whole time, and thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, Meek, for that. And now we still have an opportunity for you all to offer questions to this amazing panel, all the things that you've heard from them. Again, same process. And so I know we already have some questions lined up in the queue. Alex or Tralisha, do we have the first questions from the audience to the panelists?
Yeah, I got one right here. There was a question for Tony, and it was, Tony, do you feel like your father's situation in the prison system allowed you to step into your own purpose as an activist and an advocate?
Yeah, I guess. I think so. But you know, it's like, yeah, I think we all are some of our experiences, right? But also like it was more than just my dad, my uncles, my cousins, my friends, everybody around me went to prison, my aunts. You know what I'm saying? Like we come from that. So my fire, my passion to help my people in general is what has continued to drive me. And so it's like now that my dad home, I ain't stopping. Like I'm here, right? Like this is really who I am, you know? So I can't stop this because it literally is who I am. Sometimes I feel like, well, I used to feel like I was in like a plane crash and I was the only person that survived. Like, and I don't like stick my chest out like, man, ain't nobody like me and all that. But like where I come from, you know, and speaking of that, you talk about I ain't never did a day in prison, right? I'm so proud of that. Where I come from, that don't happen. I ain't never been arrested. You understand? I work for a supervision agency, right? You know, like a guy like me don't work while I work in terms of my day job. So I'm super proud of that. And I know there's other people like off my tree, some that I know, some that I don't, that grew up in similar circumstances that realized based on the blessings that's been bestowed upon me that they didn't have to necessarily pick up a microphone or pick up a basketball or football. They can impact their community by serving and bringing I think a perspective that is often missed or in the past was missed, right? So my dad situation obviously helped mold and shape me, and not just his situation but like him, right? Because sometimes people don't, they like he went to jail and then I'm not like we was on that phone, we was in them letters when email came around, we was in that visiting hall. And when I was younger, I didn't even talk back, right? I didn't even have an opinion. You go to school, you gonna stay away from them guys, you gonna do, that was him. So he the reason I'm here today, man. So shout out to my dad, man. Oh, can I say that about the 2A? I was just gonna say that I agree. I think you pay your debt, yeah, people should get their 2A rights too. If somebody goes to work and pays taxes and has a home and has a family, why should I be able to protect my family and they not? And then also catch this. My father came home, right? My dad came home, he lives with me. I had to turn my guns in. Like, when we talk about collateral consequences of this situation, people don't even think about that, because guess what? In people's mind, a person like me is never his son. I was like, so nobody's thinking about like, damn, well then, but his parole officer, he can't be around no weapons. He ain't never going back to jail. So whatever we got to do to ensure that he ain't violent, we doing that. But just think about that, right? So we need full rights restoration when people return. Period. Whatever those rights are.
I'm glad you got that point out, because that's an incredible, it's an incredible point. I mean, because people don't talk about there's 40,000 legal barriers to reentry. So once a person has gone to prison, there's 40 additional thousand legal barriers once you get home. Like, I think people need to understand that. So we only hear about house and banking and employment and, healthcare. We're not talking about all the other things. The other, what, were 3,999, right? So, thank you. I'm glad you got, thank you. That's why you're here.
All right, next question over here. So I think this is for the rest of the panel. Can you talk about the feedback that you get from elected officials as you're meeting with them and discussing reform? What do you hear in the Senate hallways? David or Britton or Topeka?
Go ahead, Britton, you answer.
Well, it's funny, as you talk about the conversation that happens in the legislative hallways, and of course, as many of us have all had the experience of marching up to, whether it's to the Capitol, whether it's respective state legislatures. Unfortunately, a lot of legislators feel that once they've done something in criminal justice, they've accomplished it. We're done, we've checked the box, let's move on to something else. And no matter how far along it moves the needle, sometimes we always have to check and see, well, what's the appetite to do more? And that's where the people really come in to help. It's the stories that they hear from their districts, from the people in their districts, from the people who live these experiences, from the Tony Lewises, who can actually say, this was my experience, this was the impact, this was the effect. And again, that's what moves a lot of legislators. Now, again, we talk about, and David, you can articulate this from a different perspective, but we talk about what moves, what motivates a lot of legislators to do certain things, and whether it's some of the things they see in their districts, whether that's trying to bring employers to their districts. But again, they see barriers because there's not a working job market. There's not a functional job market because there are a lot of people who have convictions that they will not hire. And so it's these barriers that we're trying to remove, but in these conversations where we're having to continue to educate legislators, both at the state level and the federal level.
Yeah, let me chime in on that, because I think that there's a small group of policymakers in the world that are passionate about this policy. They know it's the right policy. And I see David Trone over there. He's one of them. And then there are a whole group that they've got other passions, they got other projects. And here's the thing. Like Britton said, they're one and done on a lot of votes. But the other part is that they are one bad news story away from flipping around, right? And I am not making any distinction between my friends on the left and my friends on the right, right? Everybody is one bad story to tell away from going back to the tough on crime days. Unless you're part of that kind of cadre that understands the policy and believes in the policy and wants to make things better. And so the only solution to that is when people of all political persuasion go to the Hill, they call your congressman, they call your city councilman and say, enough. It's time for us to change it. And until we all stand up and do that, right, left, black, white, it doesn't matter, we're going to see the same types of policies just recycle over and over and over again.
All right, my last question. I'm over here now, Britton. So there was a lot of questions about resources. So I think if you just want to give shout outs, where can people go to find help in DC? Where can people go to find a job, to find housing? Point people in the direction.
Yeah, I just jump in real quick with that. And here in DC, MORCA, DOES, WANS, which is the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, NARC, the National Association for the Advancement for Returning Citizens, the National Reentry Network, Free Minds Book Club. We got our reentry ecosystem here is robust, and I'm gonna stop naming stuff because I'm gonna get in trouble for not naming people. But even with the, and maybe I shouldn't do this, but I will, for the agency I work for, CSOSA, which is a supervision agency, we have a lot of internal stuff, and I took that for granted a long time till I started talking to people that work in other places. They like, y'all do that within your supervision agency? Like, they like, you work there? I'm like, yes, I work there, right? And there's a whole lot of other people that do treatment and outreach and all these other things that's not typically associated with community supervision. But those things, those stabilization factors were identified. And so here in DC, and I want to shout out DC or nothing as well, because we have a special, unique experience in terms of incarceration. Everybody goes in the federal system. And when you talked about BOP and the lack thereof, and what they're doing to prepare people to come back to the most competitive job market in the country, right? So those two things don't even out. So I think our agency has to do that kind of stuff, and our ecosystem has to develop into what it is. But the caveat, the Achilles heel, is hiring policies, right? That interrupts so much of the great work that's being done. So that's why I'm saying that I think in DC at least, we have what we need in terms of resources, mental health supports, healthcare, clothing, housing can get better, but we built that. The last peg of this has to be opening up as relates to employment opportunity.
Thank you, Tony. So that's DC. Every DC, everything. But
Shout out to Dream Corps.
Look, it's all good. No, but I think it's great. DC does, that you all do have, like your leaders in the country. So I would say that. I'll share for the work that we do that centers around women and girls, the Ladies of Hope Ministries. I shared some of the resources and things that we have, but we also connect to other organizations that are national. Another organization that's here, Honest Jobs. That's another company that focuses on connecting people to viable employment resources that are right there. You go on the website, you can find a job quickly. So that's another one. myfresh.com, which is a venture that I just launched today, which is free checking accounts for people who are just as impacted, totally free. And then there's healthcare. I mean, there's so many resources out there. So reach out to any one of us. We can connect you to resources.
We got us now too. For children with incarcerated parents, I had to say that.
We got us now.
We got us
That's
now.
right. Shout out to Ebony
Shout out to
Underwood.
Ebony for sure.
All right, appreciate you. Let's give them a round of applause. And again, there's so many organizations, so many partnerships, so please take heed and take advantage of all the things that you've heard here tonight. But again, David gave a shout out to someone who has been a champion on this issue and for this issue, and one of those legislators who really understands this. And we definitely want to yield time for the congressman to come up and speak. And so I would definitely like to bring up from Maryland, 6th District, Congressman David Trone.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Appreciate it, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, everybody, how are you tonight? First of all, awesome work that we have done to put this group together. The Reform Alliance, we really appreciate your work. It's these type of high-profile groups that can bring pressure on legislators in their areas, and I would specify, more importantly, Republican legislators. We've got to be honest with ourselves. We can all talk what the panacea is, but we got to get stuff done. And that means we're not going to get everything we want done, but we'll get some of what we want done. And we got to just chip away till we get what needs to be done, which is a lot of work. A lot of work. I come about this, honestly, I work on three things in Congress: addiction, mental health, criminal justice. I'm a very narrowly focused legislature on a very narrow areas. And guess what? How intertwined are they? Totally intertwined, exactly. Can't do one without fixing the other two. So how do I get in this business? I'm a business guy. Right, Total Wine. How many customers here? Got a couple, I hope. Oh yeah, they're popping up. That's good. So I started my company after my dad went bankrupt. He was an alcoholic. I started at zero, and I built a company called Total Wine and More, starting off selling beer and soda in Pennsylvania. Now we operate in 28 states. We have 12,000 team members, and we're the largest retailer of wine and spirits in the United States. And that gave us a chance financially to give back. Because of that, I ran for Congress. I'm in my third term now, won the Appropriations Committee. That's where you want to be. We all know that. And three things we work on: addiction. I get into that. Dad's an alcoholic, and I lost a nephew 2016 to a fentanyl overdose. Every one of you has lost somebody. Every one of you. Most have lost 5, 10 people. Fentanyl overdose. We lived through that. I was very involved in that. Second issue, mental health. Mental health issues, depression, anxiety, runs in most families, certainly runs in our family. So these are things that we can care about. They're personal. They're personal to me. Addiction, mental health. But the third piece is criminal justice. So you ask, how did a wealthy white business guy get involved in the criminal justice system? I knew I had someone that would ask. Thank you. I got arrested. So I got arrested 3 times, and in the late 80s, early 90s. And at the end of the day, all had to do with business stuff, all actually led by a Republican attorney general in Pennsylvania named Ernie Priate, who then later went to jail. Yeah, went to prison. And what did he become? Bingo. Criminal justice reformer, as was said earlier, just what Ernie did. So anyway, Ernie led the charge because I'm a disruptor. I sell things cheap and low prices. When you disrupt, people attack you. End of story, we got attacked. But I always talk about it. I succeeded for 3 reasons. One is I had the education not to take a plea. And a lot of folks in our system don't have that education, because if I took a plea, I couldn't have built a business that you can't have a plea and own a liquor license. One of those 40,000 things we talked about. Second thing, I had some money, not a lot, to pay lawyers, good lawyers. And that's what most folks haven't got. They don't have that. So I got 2 out of 2 that other folks didn't have. And the third thing is, I'm white. Amen. Can I get another amen for that? Because that's it, man. Education, resources, and the fact you're white. 82% of our folks in prison now are black and brown. 82%. We know the numbers. We all know the numbers. 1 out of 3 young black men, they're going to jail. We all know the numbers. You know what I say about that? Shame on all of us that we've allowed this to happen in America. So we've got to all engage. We've got to all step up. We've got to all put it out every day, leave it on the field, and try and make change. So I succeeded, but that got me involved with the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, and I was a fan. And we started what's called the Trone Center. The Trone Center for Justice and Equality in New York City. We have 45 lawyers across the country that work on criminal justice, led by an African-American lawyer out in LA. So we do this stuff and have done it for literally decades. And when I came to Congress, that was the third piece. Because my nephew that died, guess what? He had mental health challenges too. He was depressed, anxious, and he'd been arrested 5 times. I took him out in an orange jumpsuit, off, and brought him back, gave him a second chance, and a third chance, and a fourth. But at the end of the day, that's what got me involved in this. So we come about it honestly. And we've had success bringing people together. Well, I'm a progressive Democrat. We've been able to bring folks together to get stuff done. So our bipartisan addiction and substance use task force, we passed 26 bills last session. 26 bills got over the finish line. And when you need 60 votes in the Senate and you got to get 9 or 10 Republicans, that's tougher. That's tougher. So you got to figure out how to work bipartisan. So I can be as progressive as I am, but I got to figure out how to work bipartisan. That I understand how to do. So the question is, what's next? Well, what's next is we got a lot of stuff working on. My company, Total Wine & More, has hired over 1,400 citizens. Thank you for that. 1,400. And guess how many problems? None. Never a single problem. Anonymous. Folks said, wow, I got a second chance. How awesome was that? It's all about work and jobs. And as a job creator myself all my life, I understand it's about the job. And these folks are succeeding. And guess what? We've got to ban the box across this country, don't we? So we just introduced a bill with Maxine Waters, my friend Maxine. And once again, we won't win this bill, but we got to keep putting it in and putting it in, and it will ban the box nationwide for everyone. That's a big first step. We can agree on that, can't we? Can I get an amen for that one? There we go. I'm back in church. I love it. But all joking aside, that's a good bill. All joking aside, it's a really important bill. And we got to eventually make it happen, man. We got to ban that box. But then what else are we working on? Well, my first term in Congress, we passed the Pell Grant bill. That was our bill. Pell Grants, education, back into the system. Now we're working on a new caucus. My man Zandy, where is Zandy? Over here somewhere. There he is. It was his idea, and it's brilliant. All the good ideas come from the folks working with you, always. Get a second chance caucus. So we went out and recruited 20 Republicans. No Democrats. 20 Republicans. The way to recruit Republicans is not have Democrats on your bill. Never. Never. It's suicide. It's got to be their bill. It's got to be their task force. Got 20 Republicans, then we got 20 Democrats in our sleep. Now we have a nice balanced group. So it's a second chance task force, and we're driving all kinds of different legislation. Most importantly, clean slate, fresh start, which are ways to put money back into the states to eliminate the criminal records, the arrest records for folks that have been told by a judge, you can expunge your records. But what percent get expunged? 8%. I have 8, could be 6. It's a bad number. It's a low number. So if you don't get it expunged, it doesn't really help. You can't get that job. So we got to drive it back to Texas, drive the federal government to expunge those records. That's crucial. So those two bills we're going to run with our second chance task force. They're both bipartisan. Got to be bipartisan. That's really important. On top of that, we've got another bill called due process. I guess a lot of you knew when you get arrested, you lose your Medicaid. You can't get your health benefits. You can't get mental health benefits. You can't get addiction benefits. How the hell does someone do that? In America, I lose my Medicaid when I'm arrested, not when I'm adjudicated. Arrested, not adjudicated. So last year I worked with Senator Cassidy, Republican, Senator, Louisiana, and we got that passed up to age 18. Couldn't get the whole enchilada. This year we're going to go back, and we're going to try and get the rest of it. But we got to help folks stay healthy and not be stripped of their benefits because they've been arrested but not even adjudicated. Then we got another bill, Reentry Act, that 30 days before you leave incarceration, you can get back into Medicaid. So it's all done before you go back out. That's the idea. But our most important thing we're working on is what we call a pipeline to success. That's jobs. We've got to get jobs. If folks have a job, we got phenomenal chance of stopping recidivism. If they don't have a job, it's 70, 75%, pick a number. If they've got a job, it can be in single digits. It's all about jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. With that, roof over the head. With that, car to get to the job. With that, wrap around mental health, wrap around addiction services. We put the whole package together and we can spell success. But, we got to convince my Republican colleagues, when you have 100 folks that got a job, that were citizens, they pay $1.9 million in taxes the next year. Republicans like that. It's knock down the deficit. They love that talk. And they pay $770,000 in sales and use tax. Republicans like that. Supporting local communities, all good things. And they save $2 million in incarceration costs. It's a $5 million turnaround. So we have to make an economic argument. We have to frame these issues in a way that can be acceptable to get Republican votes, because if we don't, we're just sitting here talking to each other. And we can't be talking to each other because there's folks that are incarcerated that aren't talking to us. So we got to figure out how to stop talking to each other and talk to those Republicans in a way that we can frame it, that they can understand what we're trying to get accomplished. So the money, the $5 million, that means something. $80 billion we spend on incarceration. Is that a shame? That's a shameful number. All that money should be for education for our kids, mental health, addiction, all those really key things. But we don't do it. So we got a big conference coming up, and one of my best partners was Karen Bass. You all know Karen Bass, George Floyd Act. So Karen and I worked together. Yep. Mayor Bass now, and I supported the mayor from day one, and we were delighted to be on the Karen Bass team, and it's awesome. She's mayor of LA now, but at the end of the day, we passed a bill last time. It was a police de-escalation act, $350 million passed by Congress to teach police how to deal with something that might be mental health problems and not a crime, and not to shoot first, but to talk first, to listen first, and make better decision making. So those are the kind of things we can wrap around that can be palatable to both sides. That's a big bill. That's an important bill we did with Karen. But the other thing we're working on with Hakeem, and Hakeem has been my best partner on this from day one. Aren't we lucky to have Hakeem Jeffries as our next speaker? I mean, he's going to be unbelievable. And we're coming back in 2 years. There's no doubt about that. But Hakeem, we're working on a bill right now to really implement the First Step Act. Because I'm telling you the bad news, as you said earlier, and all you guys know, it ain't happening. It ain't happening. Last year in appropriations, we put an extra $200 million. I happen to sit on the subcommittee that appropriates the Bureau of Prisons, Commerce, Justice, and Science. It's my subcommittee on appropes. We got $200 million to go to staffing, because guess what they weren't doing when they didn't have the money to guard is for guards. Eliminated education, eliminated job training, workforce development. All get eliminated, all don't happen. And then are we surprised when nobody can succeed? When nobody has a chance? We need to change the construct that when you go to prison, day one, you've suffered. You all know that, because many of you have been there. You've suffered immensely, and you will continue to suffer immensely. But we need to change that construct. Starting day two, it's about getting out of prison. Because as you said, 95% are coming out. So it's about we getting out of prison, and how do we set people up for success and for a true, honest second chance? So that's the mission. And our pipeline we're working on with businesses in this country, an opportunity pipeline, I call it. We're working with that with Hakeem, and we have a meeting coming up May 16th with JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon. JP Morgan, believe it or not, is one of the leaders in the country on second chance. So these guys know it. 10% of their workforce they hire are citizens. I have to work on that. Citizens, 10%. So we have Jamie Dimon. We probably have the CEO of Walmart coming. We've got folks from NBC, 4 major companies that do a round table. And guess who's going to be there to lead it? Hakeem, to get things started. And I hope, a Republican leader. We've asked Steve Scalise because we got to make it bipartisan. We may not agree on everything, but they're good on getting folks a job. The job market desperately needs people, so they agree on that. And they're good on saving a lot of money, $5 million every 100 people. So they're good on that. So let's figure out how we frame these issues where we can get agreement and we can move forward. So we've got a number of things that are working, but the biggest one is we got to reform the Bureau of Prison. That's my last comment. I mean, not to be generous, the Bureau of Prison is a shit show. It is. And, you know, I met with the guy that ran it before. I met with him. I sent letters. I sent phone calls. He never answered. I finally recommended in person in a hearing when I was questioning him in the hearing. And the opening comment was, Director, everything I've sent to you, you don't answer. So I've recommended you be fired. And he was fired. So now we have a reformer from Oregon, Colette Peters, a wonderful woman from Oregon, been in the job 7 months. Let's give her room to run. I've met with her half a dozen times already. We spent a full day at FCI Cumberland about 3-4 weeks ago with my staff, her whole staff, inside looking what's not working. It's everything. I mean, we can't get tablets. We can't get driver's licenses. We don't have physical space for the apprenticeship training. You need to change how prisons look, because it used to be about locking folks up. Now has to be about returning here with the rest of us. That means we need more space to teach them to be a drywaller, teach them to be a plumber, teach electrician skills. And we put together a group of big companies, Target, Walmart, mentioned JP, Amazon, First Honest Jobs, thank you, call out for you guys, UPS, FedEx, that are all interested in workers, good workers, citizens, and we're working together to build that task force that can bring these jobs through the BOP. So when you get into BOP 6 months before you get out, you got a job. And that you might not have that job where you came from. Let's say you came from Baltimore, but you might not want to go back to Baltimore. You might want new places, new faces. You might want to go to Seattle, and we can get a job in Seattle. Because these are national employers. We need to go big on the employers. They'll take the risk that one person makes a mistake. They'll take that risk. But small employers often won't, unless they're super committed. So they get a job then to go back to a different city, and they may know someone there, but it's not their home. But the other city may have a friend. He'll be happy to take them in, but knowing they have a job, knowing that soon they'll be on their own to get a roof over their head, to get all the help they need. So I don't want you to lose hope. I think there are a bunch of folks like me on my bipartisan second chance. I've got a Republican co-chair, John Rutherford, sheriff from Jacksonville. Everything I want to do in this area, Republican sheriff supports it. I've got another co-chair, Kelly Armstrong, Republican DA from North Dakota. Everything we want to do, Kelly Armstrong supports it. So we can find like-minded Republicans. Yeah, there's a bunch of just batshit crazy, but we don't talk to them, okay? Because that's a waste of my time. So we're trying to find folks that care about making our country about second chances. Isn't that what we always kind of think about America, about second chances? So I want to appreciate all your help. Thank you. But we need to hear from you, and we need your advocacy with your representatives. Thank you.
All right, as we close, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Congressman Trone is excited about this issue. But again, that's where we need each and every one of you all to be. So please, as you've heard all of the things here said tonight, hope it was insightful. Please make sure you visit reformalliance.com. If you have your cell phones out, text the word reform to 81411, and you can get all of this information, access to a lot of the resources mentioned here tonight, and can follow all the legislation and things that are being done to really help and move this needle. So again, thank you to the DC Public Library for your partnership. Please give them a round of applause. And thank you to this amazing panel, leaders, policy leaders, but but people really about the work. And please, please, again, respond to those calls of action, and please get more involved, get more engaged, and we thank you for coming out tonight. 81411. The word reform to 81411. Oh, and please feel free to grab a copy of Larry Miller's book on your way out. Free copies, please feel free to grab a copy on your way out. Thank you.